here? Do we keep them?
Yeah,
For how long?
for a while.
Not very long.
I think that
They're
would be
abnormal.
the key issue. If we don't have them, then we don't have to do this.
We made a decision.
Well,
Forever, I think. Chris is on the line.
How long?
I believe if they're abnormal, we keep them forever.
But what about the normal ones?
The normal ones, I think 6 months, is that correct, Thomas, or
I think that's right.
6 months, yeah.
A year we keep it normal.
So, normal for a year? Yeah.
And how do you dispose of them?
Right now, the way we got the cards, they separate from the forms, so there's no information on, but once it's time to get rid of them, we just autoclave them and then turn them to paper trash.
So,
Oh, I think we're safe.
I actually think we're relatively safe. But so we don't have to go into this. If you want to talk to me about this, you can.
all right. Yeah, I think we got probably move along, but, it is,
We do have a discussion about the crab A and the LD. Chris and I was gonna bring up, it up before the CBS2.
And actually, Michigan.
Since you just talked about the cycling, this might be the time.
So, this is crazy.
Are we behind?
no.
Okay. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Amanda.
So, Chris and I have been working with the Crab A, council, as well as, I'm serving on the, Crab A, expert panel for the, approval for adding to the rest. One of the things that they brought up to us is, waiting to call positive until the cyclosine comes back. Not upsetting the parents, not, alerting them until we know there's a reason. So we thought about one way that we could do that is still notify genetics as a prelim, just that, hey, we're sending this off for cyclosine. Just know that this baby's here in case it shows up in the ER for some reason or something. And then you don't hear from us again until the cyclosine comes back. And then if it's positive, we send it as a positive. If it's negative, we call it negative. Is that correct, Chris?
That is correct. So what that would require us to do is to reformat our mailer comments and make a pending mnemonic so that there's no values that would go out on the mailer for something that it actually had a low enzyme activity. And then once the results come back regarding whether it's tested to be positive or negative on the second tier test, then we would change the comment on the mailer from pending to what the actual enzyme values were, and then indicate that the supplementary testing was either positive or negative, and then the consequential actions that should be taken for follow-up on that baby.
What's the timing on the cyclosine for the lab then? Turnaround?
Chris, the timing turnaround, is it 2 to 3 days for cyclosine?
Gwen would be the best person to answer that.
Yes, it's about 3 days.
About 3 days.
And that's irrespective of day of the week, weekend, same thing?
I think it's 3 work days, right?
Yes.
3 Monday through Friday.
So it could be up to a
Could
week.
be up to 5, I guess, if you've got it on a Friday.
Long time.
You know, we would still alert genetics.
Sure.
But we wouldn't be calling the PCP, we wouldn't be calling the parents, sending them a letter or anything like that.
We've not been getting that many, but I think this is a great plan. We kind of treat it like a prelim. The GALC activity is the prelim value, and the cyclosine gives you a final.
It's the official, yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all like
We
that?
don't call PCP, just like you don't call PCP for the prelim value.
Right, we would not call them unless you wanted us to.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But then they feel on the hook.
Right, yeah, so we would not, you would be the only person we notify until cyclosine comes back.
And just to clarify, the cyclosine level would be called on.
Right now, we call cyclosine if it's greater than 10.
They won't run it on weekends.
They won't run on weekends, but you can still call.
If it resulted out on a weekend that was greater than 10, we would call it.
Okay.
But now we may want to change that level, because he was saying greater than 6, is actionable.
That was what was brought up, by
So we may look at that number and discuss that, I guess.
Natalie, are you the point for the entire state, or?
Country.
So is there a similar,
Yes.
do you get them for?
Yes, there.
Yeah, I agree with Natalie too. We kind of watch that enzyme and then act on the cyclin.
And then our Tennessee history of crab A, I don't think we had any true positives, or maybe one. Is that correct, since we started the program? And I thought there'd be more.
Right, yes, we
And
thought there would
most
be
of them have
more.
been false positives.
Yeah. Chris, well, I know we've had a couple infantile, and then mostly late onset.
I know, that was my patient too.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
for
we've had a
crab
couple
A disease,
infantile.
excuse me, for
We had
crab A
two, maybe?
disease, we had only 2 late onset.
Late
Oh,
onset.
too late
So
onset.
there's been 0 of the patients that this
Infantile.
was set up for the whole screen and the bone marrow transplant and all of that.
Right.
Over 3-4 years now?
We started in 17.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's still worth doing, but it's really rare.
Yeah.
So I just have one thing that I would advise you to get some advice about, which is high tech. Deciding to withhold results is potentially problematic in the current environment. And I just want you to talk with the state's lawyers and see what they think. Because I'm just putting it out there.
Well, I think maybe it's not withholding results, it's verifying results, right? You're not withholding information that.
We're trying to understand the clinical.
I understand that,
Yeah,
but if someone gets pissed off about it,
But we should have a written way this happens.
okay.
There should be, here's how the state of Tennessee handles Rett disease in written policy, so that we don't have to deal with your colleagues in the.
Is there a lot of utility that you can continue doing the enzyme? Might. I mean, if we're all just kind of looking at it, I mean, I don't call Duke with an enzyme activity that could fall ruin, because most of the ones that fall
In the ideal
positive.
world, we use cyclin as our
Right.
screening tool, but that is, we don't have our lab set up.
Yeah.
Right, so we use the enzyme to flag who needs cyclin. And so,
I'm just suggesting that your policy needs to take into account what the legal requirements are, so that you do it in a way that is optimal. That's all I'm
You have a
saying.
good point. Other tests, the classic one is HIV, where you do an EIH screen followed up by a more specific test. No one reports the result of the initial EIA. There would be vastly too many people alarmed. But it has to be written down, and it has to be signed off that that's how we test for it. And, and it can't just be.
But if you're sending results to doctors, but not making them available to patients, I'm just suggesting that might be a problem. And I just want you to get the lawyers to bless this, that's all.
I just know that with the council, multiple states are doing it that way. And they're using cyclin as their first tier. But, we have the enzyme set up, so that may be, a little bit different for us. But then Chris also wanted to, suggest that we do this for all LDs.
There's a message in the chat box.
So Sarah wants to know,
Crab A disease.
Chris, can you see the chat box? Sarah
Can
wants
talk
to
if
know.
you want me to.
Yes,
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
If the dried blood spot is lacking or there's not enough there to do the cyclin and then further testing if needed, have we not delayed diagnosis and treatment by not repeating the newborn screen when we knew the first one was abnormal? I mean, by the time you mail it, we have 3 days, we get results, we get a hold of the primary care or the family, we've delayed 5 days to a week there.
So I think if there's not enough to send it for cyclin, it would be considered insufficient amount, and we would go ahead and call that enzyme and ask for that repeat screening. Is that what you're thinking, Chris?
that's what I'm
There's
thinking,
not enough for
because
this.
I mean, in the past, we've gotten results for one and say there's not enough results for DNA, or they ran DNA first, and then there wasn't enough results for cycosine. So it happens.
True.
It does happen,
Okay,
it doesn't happen often. Am I on mute? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can, yeah.
You just are broken up. Your
I keep
internet
trying.
connection is not good.
Okay, I keep trying to interject into the conversation and then nobody hears me. So what I was saying regarding the dry blood spot and the quantity not sufficient, that does happen, but it doesn't happen every single specimen. So in those rare instances, we'll have to be a little diligent in the laboratory when we're accessioning to determine, count the exact number of spots that we can get and set in.
You're cutting out, Chris.
Delay. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do.
Amanda, did you share your connection with her?
No, I did not. So I think what she's saying is they would, yeah, you can type it in the chat box, Chris, but I think what she's saying is they would look at the specimen, see how much they have, and if they don't think they're gonna have send enough spots for both, then, they're gonna call that either an unsat, or we would call it out if it was a positive, enzyme. But then we're gonna have to, think about the other disorders, because right now we do call Pompeii on the weekend. And so, I don't know the urgency of those, but if she's wanting to do all the LDs that way to where that first tier.
Pompeii can be separate from the other LPs. It already is. We could still call that as positive.
Call it
Treat them all the same.
from the enzyme as a positive. So, we can talk about it more. We may have a little breakout session at the end to discuss it.
Chris left a message.
So she said we may have to unsat these specimens, by counting how many spots they actually have, so that we would go ahead and be getting a repeat in before they start running it. They would still run it for the enzyme, but if they don't feel like they have enough blood, they're gonna go ahead and call it an unsat. Still run it, and then be asking for more blood, because as soon as it's an unsat, it comes to follow up as an unsat, and we go ahead and ask for a repeat.
It may write our Q&A.
Yeah.
Like if they were able to complete the panel, I'm trying to think what we've gotten before.
Yeah, it might be.
Because we've gotten where all of the newborn screening panel was run, but we didn't have enough spots to send out.
Yeah, and instead of calling that a Q&S, maybe an inconclusive.
And unstat.
Right, maybe we could do it as an inconclusive, Chris, instead of a Q&S for that test.
Yeah, but she was saying just they raise our Q&S unstat. But it wouldn't be a global Q&S. And that's what's on the unstat, right? Okay. So I was I don't think we count these as unstat now, when they can't put it out for second year.
any more discussion on this? If not, let's move on to the next item. Dr. Hamid, would you like to update us on the Rare Disease Council?
Okay, great, thanks. So I think after our lively discussion from last BSC, I thought maybe I'll come and give a sort of better update about what CN RDAC does, or what the governor thinks it should do. So, next slide. So TN RDAC, or Tennessee RDAC, Rare Disease Advisory Council. Yeah, the Tennessee Rare Disease Advisory Council was formed by the governor of state of Tennessee and the legislature. And it is really an initiative pushed by NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. And NORD started doing this in 2018, and I think North Carolina was the first RDAC. And I think the purpose behind NORD doing it is to actually gather legislative backing across all the states for the initiative that they have and they're going to put out in future on behalf of the patients with rare disease. And so Tennessee, RDAC started right in the middle of the COVID in 2020. We have 12 members, and the governor essentially reached out to various groups and actually picked the members. And the two medical schools in St. Jude were asked to nominate one person each, and I just was in the crosshairs and I was not given a choice. So I was one of the people picked, but which does offer us some unique opportunities now, because I think I'm the only geneticist on RDAC, and I sit on the GHC, so I can kind of see where both of our missions align and aren't aligned. So currently RDAC is on 21 states. Next slide. And the membership of RDAC is pretty heterogeneous. So Dr. Scott Storome, who's the Dean of School of Medicine, and he's an ENT and head and neck surgeon, he's the head of RDAC. And it has the one genetic counselor, one geneticist, a metabolic doctor, that is me, has 4 MDs, has 4 patient advocates, organizations, parents, or family members. And so these are people who have either family members or children who have rare disorders, and are obviously, as you can imagine, very vocal participants of RDAC. The committee has 2 PhDs. It has 1 industry legislative liaison, a nurse, 1 Form B, and currently, as the committee is comprised, it has 2 members from University of Tennessee, 1 from St. Jude, and 2 from UNC. So I guess the point here is that it's a very sort of robust group, and obviously multiple people have multiple roles here. One of the MDs, for example, is also a patient care. Next slide. So really, what RDAC does is focus on advise the governor on rare disease. And all of us know that genetics, not all rare disease is genetics. There are people there who are advocating for rare immunological disease or rare rheumatological disease. So while I think those of us, many of us know that maybe 70% of rare disease may be genetic in nature, but not all. The 3 things that RDAC committee members decided, which, as you can imagine, is very near and dear to the hearts of the patient advocates, which is they want expanded genomic testing. They want, because all of these patients have essentially history of diagnostic odysseys, that in some cases, because earlier genomic testing was not available, many times it led to 6 years, 7 years, 8-year genomic odyssey. So their mission is to convince the governor and make available through TennCare easy genomic testing that is available if a specialist recommends it. That's one. The second is cutting down barriers, figuring out a system where patients and physicians, which are in outlying areas, have more streamlined access to specialists. So, for example, if somebody in rural Tennessee thinks that, okay, my patient looks like a neurological disorder, they should be able to actually access Kevin Hess's group or somebody in West Tennessee easy. So that's the second initiative. And third is, and that's the one I've been pushing for, is the issue of medical food and supplements. and what RDAC can do, and I noticed that we have the agenda item there on, but it kind of, it's near and dear to my heart. We have had Jewel Ward come and tell her story of the complication it causes. I've told our stories. I've gotten comments from Austinham. So the idea there, so we have a meeting set up with the medical director. RDAC is going to meet with the medical director of TennCare, Victor Wu, in the next few weeks. And idea here is to get at least the TennCare side on board so we can have some foothold, and then work with the governor's office through legislation, which then compels the insurers who offer plans in the state of Tennessee to essentially tell them that you have to cover this. So I think the way I think about it, because I just, like I said, by luck, happens to sit on both committees, is that the committee has pretty much, in many cases, parallel goals. It is not duplicating work of GHC. It is much more, it has much more involvement of patient support groups, so many times they're the ones pushing the agenda. And I see ourselves as partners. I think Tennessee RDAC is somewhat unique. When I talked to Nord and looked at other states' RDAC, there is no overlap between the GSCs and RDAC. So we are, I think, in a reasonably good position to actually, in issues which affect both the GSC and RDAC, to actually collaborate with each other and plan ahead and come up with, okay, this is the issue we want to talk about. But the RDAC is going to be on board. That'll be my job, sort of, essentially, to get them on board on those issues. So, any comments, questions? So I think, yeah.
Do you have a budget from the state to
achieve
those goals?
This is zero. That's what I'm saying. It has zero budget. It is all people contribute time, but I think most of it, Dean of School of Medicine at the University of Tennessee is actually there, and RDAC meets once a month, and the subgroup that is working on these three groups meets almost every week. There's a pretty big time commitment, but there are enough people committed, are devoted to it, and I think that's what also makes our RDAC somewhat unique. Other states have RDAC which sometimes have 24, 25, 30 members, and that almost guarantees that there's not going to be any sort of substantial work being done because there are so many voices. Here, the group is a tighter group, and I think it was Scott's idea to actually us meet more regularly so that there is some sort of a common purpose that develops. So, yes?
Just one comment and question, really. So the first two bullets are kind of related in my mind. And so the lack of genetics providers we've talked about for a very long time. And so since you've got the dean of the medical school there, has there been any discussion of actual, like, an educational pipeline for GCs or?
As you can imagine. So I think, so the idea there would be that, the goal here is that currently, I think what we are working through is a partnership with, let's say, Illumina, to actually, the idea, even though there's a lot of data out there to show clearly that doing directed early genomic testing can actually result in early diagnosis and a diagnostic odyssey, that's not state data. So when I did a presentation to the legislature a few months ago, the question was, do we have our own data? So the idea here is, we are trying to partner with Illumina to do a trial run of this across the state from, let's say, about 1,000 individuals. These will be individuals, not just, hey, I want my exome genomic time. These will be individuals who go to a neurologist or a geneticist and say, okay, this testing needs to be done, and that Illumina will do that testing for free, no cost to them, and we will have the data then, and we can then take it to TennCare. Because the argument we want to make to TennCare, we actually can already make that because EverLife Foundation, there are plenty of studies out there to show how much cost saving it is. We can already make that argument to Victor and say, hey, look, you have a $14 billion budget, look this much how much money you're going to save. but it's still, we were told that, hey, you guys need, maybe it's a way for legislation to kind of put us back. So we are working essentially devoting our time. There's no budget for this, but the goal would be to hopefully get some budget for some of these, because this is where the budget comes in for, we'll say, okay, East Tennessee needs help. The state needs to fund, maybe genetic counselor, providers, neurologists. Same is true for West Tennessee ETSU. At least that's the aspirational goal. Ellen, you had a point.
What I'm really struck with is how you're going to deal with the barriers to specialist evaluations. I heard your presentation about 2 weeks ago where you said in your UDN program you do 30 kids a year. I mean, there are a lot more kids that need it than that.
Yeah, but UDN evaluations are totally we are talking about pre-UDN type evaluation, right? In UDN evaluation, I think that the idea here would be, when we did a survey, so RDEC did a very early on survey, and they find out that the biggest complaint patient had was that their providers out in the community didn't even know where to send their kids. Forget about that, say you have an appointment with Dr. Ham and it'll be 1 year. It was a question about, well, I don't know. I think so we're talking about family practice nurses, PCPs who are not in Nashville, Tennessee, who are not in Memphis, who are not in Knoxville, who are serving the rest of the state, and whose knowledge base, so it may be as simple as having a database on the website saying, if you have X, Y, Z, or having a hotline, they're saying, okay, I have a patient with this complicated problem. I don't know where to send him. Do I need to send him to a neurologist? Do I need to send him to a geneticist? Do they go and see a rheumatologist? And giving that sort of advice to even get to the stage where we find out 3 years later they have an undiagnosed disease. We are talking about something straightforward, very preliminary.
I want to follow up on that. I mean, I certainly think that giving tools is a great idea, but you said, but you can't get an appointment with Dr. Ham for a year. I mean, surely your advocates are not happy with that.
They're not, but what is the solution then? Tell me the solution. I think this is a good first step. We are not going to, I think the point I would say is not having enough specialists should not mean that we don't refer patients to. I mean, the committee is not going to, Ellen, I understand what you're saying and I'm on board with you, but I think I take a different view. The committee or any of these things that we do, we're not going to solve the healthcare issues at stake. All we can do is lobby, and I think this is the issue that comes up in newborn screening, right? We are introducing expensive newborn screening, expensive treatments for diseases. But I don't think our job is to worry about the financial aspect. We cannot do that because we are not going to solve the crazy way United States healthcare system is. Absolutely not. And I'm not going to tell a patient, for example, I'm not going to refer you to a neurologist because, there are not enough neurologists. You may have a 2-year appointment. I don't think that's the way to think about it, personally.
I guess what I would say is that the way you presented it just now seemed like more of a solution than it is. And
no, it is not, for sure.
I'm just saying, if you would present it as sort of like first steps toward a solution, I think that'd be.
I think I just said that the current focus is, I don't think I mentioned anywhere that this is the solution. I think you're reading too much into what I presented. And I think, personally, from my point of view, I think we need to think positively about this situation and not just preemptively say, well, there isn't, we shouldn't think about this because there's not enough out there. We're not going to be able to solve that problem.
I totally endorse these goals. I just think that,
Anyway, I think it remains to be seen, honestly, how successful we are. Since these are unfunded mandates, the governor's office may not go for these, so we'll see. But anyway, so I think, but it offers us an opportunity, I think, to collaborate together and see where we go.
How does RDAC work with, Every Life Foundation for pushing the legislation for mandated screening?
So RDAC per se ways it doesn't work, but it's just like this committee, that if you'll have people who come and talk to RDAC. Okay, about their rare disease, pretty much in every sort of meeting. And, you know, they are just trying to then push agenda, get RDAC on their side, and say, okay, hey, can you make a proposal to the governor's office? I mean, up till now, RDAC is pretty young, and I don't think we have, other than these three things, we have not really made any sort of push.
Okay, so there has been a push from Every Life Foundation to add some legislation around newborn screening. And so RDAC's not really involved in that.
No, RDAC is not involved in that.
Okay.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to solve staffing issues right now, but that is an ongoing problem that I'm afraid will become more acute, particularly as more disorders are added. So the next item is...
Chris has a question.
Yes.
Or Chad.
She'll so we can go back to Orchard.
You have a question, Chris?
Yes, can you hear me?
Kinda.
I was trying. Can you hear me?
You're cutting out.
Chris, could you put your question in the chat, and I think we'll have Dr. S. go ahead and do his presentation right now on newborn screening feedback, and then we'll get back to your question.
Okay. Audio good? Fine. So this is timely based on discussions we've all had during this meeting. And I'm glad I looked at the agenda because I forgot until yesterday. These are all very fresh slides. I just wanted to emphasize all the good things we're doing, and I think it's hard to know when these committees and sit here, you know, what the patients actually are. And I had the privilege to both, you know, serve in this level, but also see the patients directly, as many of us in the room do. And while newborn screening, I think, is a mixture of terror for families, every discussion we said is like, oh my gosh, it's not my beautiful baby. And the ones it's designed for are tremendously excited and happy, especially when there's good therapies. So I just want to share a couple of the things that we've learned and how we put things together. And it does touch on these issues. How do you provide care for all these patients? How do you, you know, put all these complicated medical systems together? So this is the Vanderbilt example, of course. This is where I work. I just wanted to share with the group what we've been working on the last few years. We made this overall umbrella center called the Pediatric Rare Disease Center. We have a web page and everything, but it's really designed to be an umbrella term for all the diseases we talk about, the screening, and then have mechanisms for referral and for care. And then there's also a research and training side and all that kind of thing. So I co-directed with Dr. Hamid. Next slide. And I'll be fast. This won't take long to go through it. So what I think of the newborn goals is to provide therapies and, dare we say, cures, right, for children with rare diseases. So identify them and treat them. And for different examples, I'll tell you some of the clinics we run, it works well. For others, I think it does not at all, and it just depends on the nature of the particular disease. So some wins and some challenges I'll mention briefly. Next slide. So Fabry is something that we've been interested in. There's been local interest in Fabry disease. I used to think of it more of an adult disorder, but there's certainly pediatric manifestations. And since it's on our newborn screen, we are now identifying these patients quite readily. I don't have the numbers to talk about later, but every other month or so, I think we get a new Fabry. And of course, the family doesn't, and I'm usually like, don't worry about it. We got a lot of time to worry about this, but they're freaked out. So we get them in, we talk them down from that ledge, and then we get them in the program. And there is therapies. There is enzyme replacement, and I can tell you there's gene therapy coming too, which is true for most of these. And we have recently approved to be a site for adult gene therapy for Fabry. So that's all a direct result of interest in newborn screening, awareness programs, multidisciplinary, within therapies. And I'm sure as time goes on, those patients who would be appropriate for such therapies will be younger and younger, so we'll get there. Adrenal leukodystrophy is actually one of my favorite clinics because these patients are come to you and they're totally normal, and you have years before they develop issues. And you can do a bone marrow transplant, and also gene therapy has already been pre-established. It's similar to what we heard about for MLD. It's a autologous gene therapy, give your own cells back with the gene corrected in a kind of approach. And that's been published and looks good, so I think that's going to be more and more. But we already have it on the newborn screen in every state, I think, because the bone marrow transplant by itself with donor cells is quite effective for this disease. And I've enjoyed working with Dr. Russell, for example, seeing these patients. I'll talk about some of the teams they have. We pull together for each different disease. Krabbe is interesting and the hard one. The reason I'm really here is because this Hunter's Hope Foundation contacted us 6+ years ago and wanted to have more awareness of Krabbe and really were pushing for this to be in Tennessee. And I agreed to be part of that excitedly and have like a leukodystrophy network as well, where we have patients for Krabbe and other white matter diseases. And then again, same thing, we have a multidisciplinary program and we treat them. And we've had 0 patients over the last 5 years. And my personal feeling is the current therapies are not great. We should still do it because the alternative is death for these kids, but it's so hard because the window of treatment is so short for this particular approach. I think the future therapies, and even gene therapies, is still a bone marrow transplant with the same probably window. If you think about mechanistically as an aside, a bone marrow transplant works because you're giving the right cells back to the patient, who then have to migrate into the brain to do their work. And for people who think about this more, those are the microglia cells probably. And while there is a role for it, it's so hard to do. All the things we do are so logistically hard for Krabbe. So I'm worried that we're just really focused on this bone marrow approach, even with gene therapy. I think future approaches will be direct gene therapy delivered to the brain, and it has much more, I think, potential to make the window longer and make all this work more. So I'm personally a little down on Krabbe, and I hope this isn't being recorded or publicly broadcast because the Hunter's Hope community would be very upset with me. But I've seen the results. This is very hard, and it's really dependent on each disease. Of these other ones, I think it's great. This one is an incredible challenge to get together to make it effective. And SMA, I don't have much role in because Brian Burnett at our center takes care of all these patients, but just another example of true wins because these patients come in, they definitely have a lethal disorder. We'll look at the numbers later, but it's, I think, a perfect, all the screens we have are true positives because it's PCR-based. And those patients have now 2 FDA-approved therapies, the antisense oligonucleotide approach with Speranza, and more of a gene therapy approach. And those kids are also now alive, they're walking, and they're not normal. They still have neurologic deficits. That's a tremendous win at tremendous cost, right? We haven't talked about it yet, but everything here is millions of dollars per patient, but that's just what it is. Next slide. In this example, the teams, these smiling people behind the mask gave full consent for their images to be used for these cases. And these are examples of people either with Fabry or ALD who have patients diagnosed, these children, on this newborn screen and are plugged into our system. And I have on the right side here just some of the multidisciplinary nature of it. And I should say that it really starts off not with us, but with Natalie Owen and colleagues who get the phone calls and then get them in to see us. So they're the true entry heroes here. And I just looked at our numbers. So over the last few years, since we got these set up, the ALD clinic has had 10 patients, just the Middle Tennessee Vanderbilt numbers, 10 patients with ALD for neurology, genetics, endocrine, and then ultimately transplant. Fabry has had 13 babies identified that we take care of with, again, neurology, genetics, and now cardiology because they get a cardiomyopathy. Krabbe is 0, and SMA numbers are about 12 so far, again, with all those various subspecialties involved. So that's also the challenge, how you bring people together for rare diseases, for really impressive life-altering therapies. It's not an efficient way to see patients. My chairs and other people like that would rather we just see a full clinic template of patients with one sort of diagnosis, but pulling together multiple disciplines together, I think, is the way to go. But it's hard and challenging. And how you do that outside of academic medical centers, even within academic medical centers, is part of the challenge. So I really worry how we're going to do all this care for all these orders coming down the pipeline, too. And it's going to be a huge challenge. But overall, it's great. We love it. I love seeing these patients. They're scared to death, literally. And then we track them down, and then we have a therapy for them, and it's a win-win. And it's really because of everyone's activities here. So I just want to share that because we sometimes focus on the negative, but this is working. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. See what's up.
All right, let's move on. The next item is the dashboard, the data overview. Charles Lechner.
they were trying to pull up the chat, right?
Oh, the chat, okay. Let's see, hold on, Chris. Oh, can you see that? From the JSC.
Oh. So what Chris is saying is that the group here has to agree to, proceed with, study for, MLB.
I don't think we got enough information to make that decision.
Yeah, I don't know that there is enough to make a motion or vote on it without, having a thorough discussion. So perhaps, well, something can be done between now and the next meeting, which is, what is the next meeting?
November.
It'll be here before you know it.
What is it that you would like to review? So we're working towards, with the Public Health Lab, a written agreement and protocol. Is that what you would be finalized or almost final version of a specific protocol for Tennessee?
I think that would be good. That could be sent to, the people who organized your being here, and they can distribute it to all the members.
Yeah, it was Dr. Norley, is the one that we've been working with in her group.
Okay.
George, is the order, when I tried to do the study of pulse oximetry in the state, I had to get the state IRB to approve. There was actually a state institutional review board for research on state people. And has this been submitted to them? I don't know, do we say it first and then the IRB does it, or does the...
We would present it to the IRB for their approval.
I think also we need more, we need the data about, about how effective this intervention is. There was a lot more data about how this is going to be done, who's going to pay for what the thresholds are going to be, what the intervention's going to be, how that's going to be handled. It's a clinical trial. You have to do the whole thing.
Right.
I think that we need the lab, and Chris, I'm sure is worried, to tell us what resources they need. Is it going to require machines or people or whatever the lab does to make results happen? She needs to know all the details of that and tell us how practical it is to add this to the state.
They don't want to go forward, she said, she don't want to go forward with an application without you all's support or.
One thing I would say that the IRB is likely to require is who's funding the study.
So for the validation study and the pilot study, we're just therapeutic fund.
I'm just saying that has to be disclosed to the participants.
The participants being every newborn in the state of Tennessee.
I think the IRB has to figure that out.
Do we just need to make a motion that we're interested in pursuing this so we can get things lined up? Is that what Chris is looking for? I think we are, because this is likely coming as a therapy. We don't need to approve the whole thing. All right, we know that the next steps should be taken. We endorse that.
I think Chris should tell us what it would entail.
And then we need to see it.
Yeah, and that was why we want to endorse it, so we can move forward to the next step.
Make a motion that you endorse us moving forward to apply for the study and IRB, Chris? Apply for the IRB. Does anybody make a motion?
Sure, I make a motion to move forward.
I have a quick question, with respect to the data, is the data she's looking for with respect to the methodology and protocols that have been previously published, or is it with respect to the gene therapy that Origin Therapeutics is applying for?
I would like the outcome in the gene therapy. I mean, that's the way the very much is.
With that request, I can provide the Lancet article, if that would be useful to this group.
I'll start.
I think we want both. We want to see what the logistics would be for this lab to do it, and then we want to know why we're doing it.
Absolutely, yeah, just I need that request to be able to send legally that publication. So there's a couple of publications I can provide to this group with the contact that I have, including both the protocol methodology publication and the Lancet paper.
How does Origin pay? You give the state a lump sum of money? Do you, I don't understand how an industry can pay for
With the public health lab, right? So Charlotte, I don't know that she can speak to this, but connection is a little challenging. But she works with contracting with the public health lab and all of these studies around the world.
So you guys would figure out the extra costs needed, I think you'd have a contract with them. We've done that before. Yeah.
Or, would you like to state the motion?
Okay, so the motion to move forward with the IRB application process was made by Dr. S.
And an assessment by Chris and team on the feasibility of doing this by the state.
Okay.
Did you write that down? Margaret's writing it down.
All right, second, do we want to do a roll call or?
Yes, go down your list.
Let's do a roll call vote here. Dr. Aguinaldo,
Second.
that would be a yes.
Okay, yes. Okay. I second the second. Thanks.
Dr. Khan,
Yes.
Dr. S?
Yes.
Okay.
You make the motion.
Made the motion. Let's see, who's the next? Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Ms. Matthews?
Yes.
Dr. Clayton?
Practicality.
Motions to, further, proceed with,
I think it warrants further investigation. I think we need to see the protocol before it goes to the IRB.
okay, that's, I think, believe what we're gonna do. Dr. Hamid?
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Serrano? Are you on mute? Is that a yes?
Dr. Serrano?
Moving right along. Dr. Russell?
Yes.
Dr. Stevens?
Yes.
Dr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Killen?
Yes, I agree.
Dr. Bosil?
Yes.
Dr. Hale?
And on the chat, Serrano did respond, yes.
Okay. Dr. Emerson? No answer. And, I vote yes. Dr. Clark?
Yes.
Okay. Did we miss anyone? I don't think so. Except for Dr. Emerson. But the vote is in favor, so we will proceed. Please get the information to Dr. Norley, and we'll distribute it, review it, and bring it up at the next GAC. Okay. All right, thank you. Aren't you done yet?
Guess so.
Okay, all right, be sure to speak up so that, people back here.
Hello, everyone. I promise I'll be brief so we can stay on schedule or get back to it. My name is Charles Lechner. I'm a fellow from the Association of Public Health Laboratories that's been here at the lab for a little over a year now. I spoke at the last 2 GAC meetings about my main project, which was to create a public dashboard that would kind of visualize and monitor some of the performance indicators that is used by the newborn screening laboratories. And so at the last GAC meeting, it was pretty much completed, but it wasn't actually fully out yet. Now that it is, I just want to show you guys where it is, show off a couple interesting things about it just to kind of promote it. So, where is it? If we start from the Department of Health website, we can go to the program areas and get to our newborn screening section. And we'll see there's a few content tiles at the bottom. Excuse me. One of them will be for the dashboard. If we click on that, we'll be brought to the website where the dashboard is and the main page of the dashboard. So the dashboard, the main page of it at least is a little snapshot view of kind of recent performance for, at this time, the state, but you can also kind of filter down by an individual facility if you wish. And here we're showing basically the last 3 months worth of data for our 8 indicators. Our number of births, our screening rate, our number of dry blood spots, the unsatisfactory specimen rate for those blood spots, and then some timeliness indicators, collection timeliness, received timeliness, and results reporting timeliness. You'll also notice that some of these have kind of goal indicators, and we have some kind of conditional formatting to make it easy so that at a glance you can see if a facility or the state has met a goal for that particular time frame. Now, a couple things that I just kind of want to highlight to maybe kind of show the utility of the dashboard versus some of the reports that we currently have, things like that. I'm going to dive deeper into our unsatisfactory specimen rate by clicking on this button here. And now we'll see we have the past 12 months worth of data for unsatisfactory specimen rate for the state, and we have some options on the right-hand side to look at more data. We can change the granularity. If we want to look at month versus quarter versus year. And then I won't dive really deep into this, but you can look at individual facilities as well, select different facilities, filter facilities based on their location or their size.
Are you sharing the slides? They're saying that yes.
I should be sharing Microsoft Edge.
That's for
Should have been selected in the green line around it.
I can see the screen.
Okay. So we're looking at the past 12 months. Something interesting that I just want to point out to kind of highlight the utility, of a dashboard versus our kind of standard reports is I'm going to drag this all the way out to view all the data we got available right now on the dashboard. It's going to look a little bit messy at the start. We have a lot of dips and peaks up there, but something interesting that I've noticed is you'll notice there's a peak here, there's a peak here, there's a peak here, and there's a couple more peaks back here that also follow this pattern, but these peaks are all December. Seems like in December we're receiving more unsat specimens compared to the other months. Not really something you can see with some of our other standard reports. It could be something we could dive in deeper, maybe this particular facility, maybe it's just a general holiday rush, something like that. But it could be then targeted maybe like a reminder email or flyer to kind of have some more care when collecting dry blood spots, things like that.
Can you do that by disease?
We don't have stuff like that by disease. It would be interesting to do that maybe as a more internal side, since this public facing, we didn't want to put more specific information on there. But that would be something I think that would be interesting.
Right. These are specimen unsatisfactory, like blood spots aren't filled with blood.
Yeah, like quantity not sufficient, non-uniform, things like that.
But what about blood spot degraded? Is that would be in here too?
We have one for like,
Sorry, what'd you say?
Let's say too much heat or too much cold, the blood spot is not.
That is one of our, no, that's not one of our unsat. Greater than 10 days is one of them. But like blood spot degraded, there's altered.
yeah.
But that could be a number of different things.
What I'll do is I'll change it to the year so we can see kind of a trend over the past year. It has gotten a bit better.
I thought when you click on it, you have two tips showing up the all kind of different types of.
So if we highlight over one of them,
Yeah.
you're able to see an actual breakdown of kind of the codes that we've been given to each spot as to why they're unsat. Right now it's grouped by year too, just so I changed that so we can see that trend. So then just some interesting trends. Dr. Lee was kind enough to use some screenshots of the last JC meeting to show these trends. I'll do it again just to see how it looks like on the actual dashboard. Our collection timeliness over the past few years has definitely gotten better for the state, which is great. Same thing for our receive timeliness, if we go into that. And then I think one of the greatest ones, which looks really nice, is our daylight 5 results reporting. So this is for specimens that are flagged positive for time-critical disorders, so those infants that need that care right away. And you'll see that the lab has gotten much better, so reporting those results out by that daylight 5, which is great to see, and hopefully we can continue improving. There's a couple other things here too that I won't really mention too much. I will mention there's a view for facility ranking, because I know that our nurse educator in the follow-up program has used that. If we click on that, we'll see how all the facilities kind of rank up to each other over a given time period. So it's really easy to identify facilities that may be struggling for certain indicators over a given time period, or just right now we're looking at all the data we got there. So I know our nurse educator has been using that quite a bit, so it's had a nice impact at the state level. We're hoping it has a good impact since it is a public resource to facilities as well as just the general public. And maybe it is useful to you, or at least interesting to you. You can share it with colleagues. If you do so, also if you scroll down, there's a little feedback survey if you have questions, comments, feedback, as well as a little video that kind of highlights some of the features again. So I will leave it there, just trying to keep it brief, but I'm happy to answer any questions or anything like that if there are any.
So what happens to this? Who's going to update you once you move on from it?
Dr. Lee.
So,
Dr. Lee is.
Dr. Lee, I guess, will be in charge of trying to maintain it, but I have made it so everything is pretty much automatic. There should be, unless something goes wrong with it, then it should be automatically updated.
And this is amazing. I think this is great because you can see trends. Great work, I would say. Is there a commendation the committee can give our fellows?
Where's some of your funding from your committee?
Yes.
Shouldn't there be check boxes in that green one up there instead of X's?
I'll mention, so for unsat specimens, we have kind of these two goals. One is like an actual goal line for less than 1%. One is says recognized, because facilities are recognized if they get less than 2% of blood spots. That isn't technically the goal. So we include both of them, but technically not the goal.
Are you going to publish this? This is the paper that you could.
It is, and hopefully it'll be published very soon.
Okay, good. And where did you submit it?
The International Journal of Annual Screening.
We're sending this at the Newborn Screening meeting in October.
We should, we'll have a poster there, I think. So we presented to at the APHL conference, annual conference, and tried other things to try and just get publicity out about it, kind of promote it.
And the TPHA next week.
And the TPHA, at the end of September, we'll be there talking about it.
So when does your rotation end?
I believe June 2023.
How are you doing?
He's gonna offer you a job.
Dr. Dooley says I'm getting lost in the basement, I guess.
Yeah, we're gonna try to keep him if we can.
Is there a readily rememberable link to this, or is it that whole line up above here? You go to this, how did you get to this
Large
site?
thing, yeah.
So you can go to cn.gov/newborn screening. So that's kind of our, short URL, and then scroll to the bottom to access the dashboard.
Okay, that's the original.
Four tiles and the dashboard with no more to it, yes.
That's our rememberable one.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Cool.
All right, Amanda?
Okay, I'll try to go fast so everybody can eat lunch. Pulling the slides up. So the OZ system continues to be implemented in the hospitals, and that's going well. We are still working out some kinks and issues here and there, but we met yesterday with our courier to push forward the track it part where we can track it from when it leaves the hospital until it gets here to the lab as well, which should help with delayed and lost specimens. So that piece should be coming soon. We do have a new program director for our perinatal and genetics that's replaced Ashley Moore. Trang Wadsworth, do you want to stand up? This is Trang. She received her master's in social work from the University of California, Berkeley. She is licensed. She is a licensed master social worker with 24 years of experience working with children, families, and individuals, and we're really glad to have her on our team now. So she helps us with, genetic contracts and endo contracts and all that, the contracts with all of our centers, so, you'll get to know her much better. We did send out a program feedback survey, we're asking that you please try to complete that before August 31st so that we can use the feedback to improve our program and or celebrate the things that we're doing well. If you didn't get that, survey, reach out to me. I'll be glad to resend it to you. We have started an RDX and long-term follow-up work group. We're gonna meet today immediately after the GAC meeting, for some discussions. We've met once, and discussions included and are ongoing about which disorders we're gonna do long-term follow-up for, what information should be collected for each of those disorders, how long and how often should we collect follow-up information, what should we do about out-of-state babies, and is there a capability for tertiary centers to be able to scan images or test results into the charts in RDX. As we put more together, we will present that to the committee for review and suggestions. We are very excited about it, hope to have some of these questions answered soon so that we can move forward with the development of the RDX portal, which will allow the tertiary centers to enter diagnosis and treatment without having to send all that paperwork to us. So hopefully cut down on some more paperwork. Our false negative reporting work group is going to be meeting in the next month to discuss final details for education distribution and ending the work group, since we've kind of met all our goals as far as what we wanted to do for that. The reporting form and the PowerPoint with voiceover has been posted to our website, and I included the link where you can find that. And then we have an education letter and an education flyer that's been approved and finalized, and they're included in your packets. Dr. Walsh did have a question about including CCHD and hearing in the false negative letter. The only thing about CCHD is we have our own form for reporting CCHD false negative. So we could include it, but it would be a different link. This was gonna go out to like PCPs and then specialist clinics. The reporting form for the CCHD we sent to cardiologists specifically, and then PCPs as well.
Right.
But I'm not sure about hearing, if we want to add that or just strictly stay in metabolic and then maybe work on a hearing piece later of, hearing loss. We don't really do false negatives for hearing loss, but we do kind of.
We have those make onset, but I don't know.
Right, yeah, that pass and then they're.
Yeah, you can't know whether you missed them or they acquired it.
Right. And then the next thing is the TSH low birth weight follow-up updates. I just wanted to give a brief update on that. So after we changed the procedure in May to include a call to the PCPs, if a repeat was not received, we've not seen a big impact yet, which has not been very long. So we will continue to monitor this over the next 6 months and reevaluate. But you can see in the chart, and Stacey does the next one, I think it's a little easier to see, that adding the call has not really increased the percentage of number of repeats received. Actually, the only one that we did see an increase in was the
High birth weight.
the highest birth weight, yeah.
And the difference not statistical.
Yeah, it's 3%. It wasn't statistical difference. So we'll just continue to evaluate that. We're gonna continue to do the call. And then, but if at some point we see that it's really not making an impact, we may take that piece out of the procedure if it's not making enough difference, because it is adding quite a bit of work to the follow-up team. And then our education, the hospitals and midwives, we're having an education summit for them on September 16th and October 4th. They can attend one or the other. We're gonna provide program updates, and we hope to reach new nursing and med school grads that may work in NICUs or well baby nurseries, as well as management, midwives, and current nursing staff of the hospitals. We're gonna be offering CEUs and laboratory PACE credits, and we did include the agenda, the flyer that we're sending out to all the hospitals and midwives in your packets, so that you can see the information, and you're welcome to join if you want to see Hillary do her education. And then I had a conversation with Sarah Norton when we was at the Surge meeting in North Carolina, and one of the things we talked about was, should we be collecting data on the diagnosis made by the genetic centers after we make these referrals to you all? We're sending you our hearing loss diagnosed children, and we're not really getting anything back. We didn't ask for it back, we didn't want it back, but now that we're thinking about it, should we be collecting that data? Should we be at least documenting if you make a diagnosis
Yes,
of some type of genetic disorder?
I think the answer is yes, we should do that.
Okay, so for that, we will have to change our procedure a little bit, and we will follow up with some type of communication to the centers after we send the hearing loss to get that final.
Yeah, I think I would also ask the center what type of testing they did.
Okay, so.
Different centers, because it will tell you long-term what is more useful than other instead of tendency, because different centers are going to use different ways to molecularly test or other ways of testing. Do centers do CT scan or not? I mean, all that stuff.
Right, so, when we
There's a
proceed,
little
ask
form
for the
that-
diagnosis and then what type of testing was done.
It's
What type of
parallel to what
molecular?
it's what you're doing with the other tests.
Exactly.
You get a blood spot that's got a high 17-hydroxyprogesterone, you refer them to the regional areas that do this, but you want to hear back, how did you test it, what date did you test it, what was the number?
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
So basically, what we're collecting on the others, we'll be collecting on our hearing loss referrals that we're making to the genetics.
You might even want to ask, like, did they do a treatment, did they put kids on hearing aids? Because that's good publicity for why you do this
Yeah,
program.
true, okay.
And the testing, I would make sure they have an option for, some centers may image, and some centers may just do molecular testing, so I would just make sure that they are reporting both of them.
Okay.
And then, the other thing would be, what did they see? Did they see ENT or genetic, or only one of the other?
Right. So she sends her diagnosis back, when one is made. It just takes a while sometimes to get a diagnosis due to collaboration with ENT and CAT for genetic testing. So, and she does send those back. We currently just, I think, document it in the notebook, but we do nothing else with it. But if we're gonna do this for all the centers, then we will create a way to collect that data so that we can also report out that data eventually.
And the genetic codes are going to be very diverse, and so figuring out exactly what you want, I mean, just saying genetic diagnosis, I don't know how helpful that is. It's a little bit helpful, but, if you want to get really detailed on what you get back, there's going to be a lot of different potential.
Well, just list the gene, I mean. I
Yeah,
think that's what
right,
we wanna do.
right. I don't know how you want to annotate that, but that'll be part of it, I would think.
Okay. And some of this may fall into our long-term follow-up, instead of our short-term follow-up.
And I'm wondering, is there a place to say, well, referrals make the genetics, but, sometimes genetic testing cannot be completed. And so, I know, like right now, it's easy to get genetic testing for hearing loss, but as you know, the lab that's very popular with us sending that genetic testing, a lot of their free genetic testing is being pulled back. And so, we're relying on the insurance of the patient themselves. They are each on a health test.
Right, okay. So we can include that and then maybe a space for the reason why it wasn't completed, refused or, insurance or whatever, And then, I think
That would be helpful to have data at a collection category, so thank you.
it would be helpful to have data collection, yes. So I think we'll include that, Jennifer, in our, long-term follow-up. So we just added a little more to that.
What are you gonna do with that?
I don't know. Right now, we're gonna collect it, see what we get. You talking about the long-term follow-up, or are you talking about the hearing loss diagnosis?
Yeah, the hearing loss that you figured out that the child has, Down syndrome, that you did diagnose until later.
I mean, I'm assuming
because they're hearing loss.
we'll collect it for, like we do now, and then eventually we could look at trends or, treatments that are being used. Part of the long-term follow-up reasoning to do it is, to identify, health equity, that kids are getting treated equitable all across the state. To also identify areas, that may need, more information, like the variants of unknown significance that end up turning into disease with long-term follow-up. We don't know that now because we don't collect that data. But if we start collecting it, then we can look and say, all of the centers have had a child with this variant that we didn't know if it was going to turn into disease. They all did, or they all didn't, or, just to give us more information. So it'll be here, and that way if y'all decide you want more information, we'll add it.
The other thing is that it's not, how you test for hearing loss is not standardized in many ways. I mean, genetically, right? There's still controversy in the field.
I totally
Yes.
understand. That's why I was kind of curious.
So I think that will help
Because
us.
half of them aren't even gonna get it because they don't have insurance. It just seemed like work that wasn't gonna benefit anybody. I'm all for that.
It could look great on an annual report to somebody.
Yeah.
Well, I think, we should not be shy of collecting more data, because data will always help us in the long run.
I'm sure we'll come up with some creative way to
I
make it
need more
useful.
information, especially information this granular about something that state is already spending money on. It's, always gonna be useful, I think. That information is there, all you're doing is collecting.
Yeah.
The renters already know that.
And so on those cases too, that if you identify that the child, if we wasn't able to identify it, and you identify the child has CMV, can you all report that back to us as well so that we can track that data of CMV cases?
Yes. Here's one. You test them.
We don't, some of the centers may.
Yeah, so, but when they do the history, because we don't always get that information, and when they do the history, or if we've made a referral, they may find a patient that mom says, oh, well, I had CMV, or it may be in your paperwork that we don't ever see. So just if they identify one, we try not to refer any that has that as a risk factor, but that's not always conveyed to us. Not always needed, yeah. Stacy, you can go to the next slide unless anybody else has anything else on that. So what's next for us? We're gonna continue to focus on the hospitals not meeting the benchmarks for the unsatisfactory specimens and transit time, and educate on recent changes and implementations in the program. We'll continue our Oz implementation in the hospitals until we get them all, signed up and working with that. Looks like MTS2 addition, work group is probably gonna be needed. There's gonna be more discussion later about that. So, we will need volunteers, from the tertiary centers and, our group and lab as well to help with that. And then our RDX and long-term follow-up work group will continue to meet and finalize information to be collected and presented to you all. Any questions or comments?
Can I ask the newborns, the false negative report, is that part of your discussion here, or is that gonna come up again? There's a document here about.
Yeah, that was part of mine, that's just showing you the letter that we had approved.
Can I make a
Send out.
comment on that real quickly?
Mhm.
And I can't, is Christy Mullen back there? No, okay, I couldn't see through all the masks. We had an incident that really was kind of revealing in that I can't even remember which of the endocrine screens came back positive, and we tried to get, so she called a mother to get her to bring her child back for repeat screening. And the mother said, why is Vanderbilt calling me? And Ellen, I'd be interested in your thoughts here. So why is Vanderbilt calling you? And then so Christy, I see the same language here, said, well, the state tells us about these results so that we can help and follow up on this. She goes, why is the state talking to Vanderbilt about my kid's records? And I didn't get involved in this personally, but when I hear that kind of discussion, it usually to me means the state probably means this lady has had some DCS encounters before. Like, she was just kind of upset that Vanderbilt was in any way involved with this. And why is the state sharing information? I see here it says it's the responsibility of the provider to notify the state. Maybe the word state ought to be newborn screening program or something like that.
Yeah.
And then provider seems a little weak. Like, can we just say diagnosing? Like, who's that? Oh, that's the PCP? Or like the diagnosing provider?
Yeah.
You know, something to be a little bit more clear, because I could just see this kind of slipping into nowhere. Like, oh, I thought so-and-so was gonna do it.
Right, yeah, diagnosing provider.
So, two things. I would say diagnosing clinician rather than provider. I'm hearing a lot of pushback to provider by, I mean, I write about this all the time, but it's just.
Yeah, that's, I think even
I
that.
think clinician would be better, because sometimes people are taken care of by nurses, rather than by physicians. I think the thing that you're talking about is, this has obviously been, the idea that somebody that you didn't ask knows something about you in the medical setting is actually really quite upsetting to a lot of people. We've seen lawsuits in Texas and Minneapolis. We've seen this case in New Jersey. And so I think newborn screening program would probably be a really good way to say it rather than the state of Tennessee. Because, well, I'm not going to go into it further. I think your suggestion is spot on, and literally spot on. I think the newborn screening program would be a really good way to say it's not state of Tennessee.
Okay, we'll make that change.
I mean, it's provoked by Vanderbilt as it is, but it's less provoking than Tennessee, probably.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Amanda. Okay, Dr. Liu, please, update us on the data.
I'll make it short. So this is the data update for the first 6 months of 2022 with all the our key performance indicators. So we see the first bar, those are, we recorded 41,457 births, and this is the births in hospitals only. And 41,388 of them received a dried blood screening. And if we exclude the 51 babies who died and the 17 refusals, so those did not receive dried blood spot, then we actually got 100% screening rate for those 6 months. And the next column was for CCHD, so we got some babies died and refusal, and we also got a little over 1,000 babies that were either on oxygen or they were already pre-screen diagnosis already made, or so between those, the screening rate was 99.3%. So, and the last column was for hearing screening. And for that one, we also exclude some babies that at the time of the data was run, which was earlier this month. So the babies, we had some preemies, and the corrected gestation age was not even 36 weeks yet, so we exclude those 54 of them. And so overall, we had 98.89% of screening. So that's pretty good. We have been doing fine for those screening rates. And if you go down to the bottom, I don't know if those sitting in the back can see, if you advance this, and yeah, you see the onset rate was 1.97%. So we had been like below 2 for a while, and then we went back up. So finally, now we went down below 2% again. So I'm very excited, and I will have another slide looking at the trend. So this one is on the left panel. Those are the collection time for initial specimens, and so this shows the percent of specimens collected within 24 and 36 hours of age. So we have had 87.3% of babies meeting those targets for the initial specimens. And we also have 9.9% of the babies, their first specimen were collected greater than 36 hours, but less than 48 hours. So some of you have been here long enough, so you remember we used to have the target of being 24 to 48 hours. So if we only had a very small portion, like 1.5% of total, that was collected greater than 48 hours of time. So that was very good too. We did have 1.3% of then collected less than 24 hours, but we don't usually call them, this is onset specimen, but we don't really call it because they're supposed to, if you have to transfer the baby, so we want you to collect regardless of age. So we don't want to count that against the hospital doing what they're supposed to do. So, but again, we're doing very good. And on the right panel, those are the transit time. That's for the initial and the repeat specimens. Basically, it's for all the specimens that received in the lab within by different time by hours. So the target was less than 48 hours. So as we can see, almost 24% of specimens received within 24 hours, and another 63.3% received less than 48 hours. If you advance and have so in total, meeting the target, we had 87.2%. So this is very good. We're seeing improvement as well. And then another 10% was greater than 48 hours, but still less than 72 hours. And then we had very few specimens that is greater than 3 days. So this is very good. So now go to next. And this is the onset. And this is a straight screenshot from the dashboard Charles just presented. And we look at the past 6 quarters. So this is for the statewide data. And we can see, how in the fourth quarter of 2021, we went up to be the big peak, and then we started going down the first quarter of 2022, and then the second quarter, we continue to go down. So I hope we can continue this trend and not going up again. So
I think the data from when he presented suggests that we'll go up again in December.
I haven't looked at that because I do have, for the transit time, I will show you, we do have that trend, but for onset, I haven't noticed that, so I'm going to do a little study and hopefully have something to present next time. Go to next. So this one is the collection time, meaning 24 to 36 hours benchmark for initial specimens. And then we went back to, so like 7 years of data. And as we can see, so in 2015, we started only 61% of specimens being collected within this time frame. Again, at that time, we were still using the benchmark of 24 to 48 hours. And we officially changed the rule in October 2021. And that's marked over there. And then as we can see, that's a continuous increase and a steady, very like a steady increase, so which is very good, very nice. And, so the first 2 quarters of this year, it went up to like upper 80s, and I'm hoping one day we can get to 90s. So it's just very exciting to see all the good work you guys have been doing, all the, the hospitals really doing good job. Next one. And so this one is transit time for all the specimens, and I had presented at every meeting, so you guys see something like this before. But at this time, just want to show, how we started the 7-day courier service in the summer of 2015, and then we see the specimens meeting the less than 40 hours after collection arriving at the lab, so they just doubled right away. And then kind of like holding somewhere around like 60% for a while, and then we saw a little bit increase, and then we saw some dips, and then increase and dip. It's like it's just like a very nice pattern of like going down and up, but overall it's going up. We can see if you draw a line, you can see it going up, and so actually if you look at those dips, those were either Q4 or Q1. And it's just like a winter time in Tennessee, and we expect that kind of delay, and it just, you just can't get away. I mean, everywhere is icy cold, and the road is all icy, so it just so that affects the transit time. So the last, actually it started from 2021, we're getting to upper 80s and then kind of lower 90s, and so we're really kind of doing very good. I think all these hospital visits and Hillary, they probably don't want to drop your number. So all those hard efforts really, seeing the difference. It's always good to have some data to show all the great things we do, really, making a difference in the numbers. Yeah, and I believe that's all my talks, so the shortest ever. So, any questions? Thank you. Okay, so I'll get back to you in like 30 minutes.
We are ahead of schedule, that's not possible. Okay, well, we can break now, I guess, and I guess this is there, lunch out there?
Lunch is outside.
Yeah, so you get 40 minutes. We'll meet back here at 12:40. Okay. Don't you have that little chime? You went in the hall? Do we need to do a roll call again? Okay. All right. People online, we're ready to start again. So the first thing we're going to have is lab updates, and Thomas Childs from the Newborn Screening Lab will tell us about several things.
Just a few.
Okay.
Fancy.
Yeah, I
Look at that, snapping up a little bit.
I wish I would have thought the very first time I did slide, and it was horrible. One slide was really big, the other slide was super small, so now that I've learned to do some PowerPoints, I try to change it up a little bit. But we're gonna do some updates. I don't have too many slides this morning. I just got 2 slides that we can discuss. But we're gonna talk about the last GAC. We had the new TSH 3 to 7 day of life cutoffs that we made, and that we all agreed upon. Our old cutoff used to be 0 to 7 days. This is for TSH, and then we had our 8-day cutoff. And so we all switched to the 0 to 2 days, and then the 3 to 7 days, the new one that we created. And then we also just kept our regular 8-day cutoff. And so from that cutoff, which we put into use, we put it in May the 3rd, and so I just did, I collected some data from May the 3rd all the way up to July 31st. And so that, for all the specimens that fell into that range, it was only 441 specimens that fell into that range. And of those specimens, only 8 of those specimens reported or were reported as positive. And then when I was looking up each one of those, I saw that 3 of them were confirmed. 3 of them were confirmed diagnosis, and then 3 of them was confirmed as normal. 1 baby was deceased, and then the other one was still pending the result because of the low birth weight. And so waiting on that one to come back in. And using and then just another thing about those 8 specimens that were in there, 4 of them would have been positive for our regular cutoff, but the other 4 that were in there all fell within the 3 to 7 day range, so that helped to catch that. But caveat to that is the 3 that were confirmed, all those were the high value, so it wouldn't have mattered whether it had been the 2 day, the 0 to 2 day, or the 3 to 7 day. But that's pretty much it for that. So the 3 to 7 days of life, the new range is working, so it is catching some babies. It just so happened that these ones that were confirmed would have been confirmed with our other range. Next slide. Any questions on the next slide? All right, so we still having staffing issues as well. I'm sure nobody else is having staffing issues. Our area is the only one with that. But we did hire 2 public health lab scientists once, and those will be the ones that work on the bench and help us with testing and reporting of our specimens. We also hired 1 public health lab tech 3 and then 1 public health lab tech 1. And so the lab tech 3 is the supervisors of the 1 and 2, and so they're involved in doing our specimen accessioning, getting the specimens ready for us to punch. They're involved in doing the demographics and getting it ready for us so that we can release. So they type in all the demographic information. And so, and hiring all, well, I guess it should be, and then hiring all 4 of them, it's going to help to increase our turnaround time and allow us to report out even faster. And so we still have positions that we do need to fill anyway. We have one public health lab manager 1, which is in Gwynn's area, as well as Gwynn is in need of 1 public health lab scientist 1 as well. And so 1 public health lab manager 1, and then 1 public health lab scientist 1. And so once she gets those, that'll really help her area out as well, and kind of fill in all these gaps that we have. But we do appreciate everybody's patience in this. But we still work 7 days a week, and then we still prioritize our work so that we get the positives reported out as quick as possible, so that follow-up can contact you all, and so so that the baby's care is not delayed. All right, next slide. Yeah. All right, next slide. All right, next slide deal with me done. Any questions? All right, thank you.
All right.
When?
We're waiting to send your slide.
Got some big shoes.
I'm not worthy. So, can somebody cut off his theme music?
We should have put that up.
I know, yeah.
Well,
I've got it on here if we ever want to.
Could you do it after this? I'm just gonna give a brief overview over, some updates on HCY, MMA, MCA, where we are with the C3, C2, and methionine. Brief update on CAH, second tier, how that's going. Our MPS2 and GAMP, gonna discuss that a little bit, and just a brief update on the So with HCY, MMA, MCA, previously, when we first started at the first of the year from January up until March, we were testing for methionine, C3, and C3-2. And any of those that flagged, we would reflex them over to second tier. So as you can see, C3 kind of was the driver behind it because it flagged the most. We had about 78 of those that flagged during that time, and 10 that flagged positive during the second tier testing. So we had 5 of them to flag methionine, for methylmalonic acid, acidemia, and 3 for propionic acidemia, and 2 for the MMA and MCA. So after we had our last DAC meeting, we decided that we would only flag, only send those over that repeated for C3, C2, and methionine. If those 2 flagged, then we would reflect to the second tier. So when we did that, our numbers dropped significantly. We had 2 during that span from April up into July for methionine, and just 1 flagged for C3, C2, and only 1 that was actually abnormal for MMA. Next slide. So with that, we decided we would change our cutoff for C3, C2, so that we could, as Chris would say, throw a wider net out there so that we can capture more. And so our current cutoff right now is 0.46 microliters per mole per liter. And so we're suggesting that we go to 0.34. So, and the reason that we're doing that is we've screened from November of 2019 all the way up into June of this year, and we looked at over 228,000 samples. And out of that, for C3, there was about 35 that were presumed positive, and out of that, there were 9 confirmed positive. That 9 had 1 with that flagged at 0.34, and that was in the 99.9 percentile. So that's why we're actually suggesting that we change our cutoff from the 0.46 to the 0.34. Next slide. And same thoughts behind methionine. We screened from November all the way up into June of this year. We looked at 142,000 samples, and we had about 14 presumed positives and 3 confirmed. And in that, we had the lowest sample that flagged that low was at 68.0, and that was at the 99.9 percentile. And so we're suggesting that we change our cutoff to 68. So we will be going from 74 to 68. And update where we are with our CAH validation. So we've had many delays, but this time we feel that we will be able to get to the point of where we can actually validate this assay. We have been working hard with trying to optimize it on the system that we have, and with staffing shortages and with just trying to get the reagents, and it's just been quite a few things that have delayed us getting this test out. But we hope that in September we'll be able to start the validation, get our SOP done, and by the time November gets here, we can start looking at going live. So, but in the meantime, we have been sending out specimens to Mayo,
And so far, from May up until the end of July, we've screened over 23,000 samples, 740. And with that, we've had about 58 that were considered presumed positive. And out of that, the second tier had 10 that were confirmed positive by second tier. But we've only had one confirmed positive baby, and that baby actually was diagnosed, and it was a male boy, a little over 3,200 grams, and it was an out-of-state baby. So the update with MTS2, well, what it is that we're looking at is going to be a lab-developed test, and MTS2 will require 2 dry blood spots, and it has an incubation of 18 hours. It'll take about 1.5 minutes for us to actually process these samples. It'll be considered a standalone test because we're having to touch 2 different plates for it, and it requires that we have to centrifuge and transfer this sample because we're combining it with our neo-LSD assay at some point. It still runs as a positive ion mode, and we feel it'll take us about 6 months to implement this test. Our cost per year is estimated around $270,786. GELT also will be a lab-developed test. It uses, it'll use the same dry blood spot that we use with our NeoBase-2. The marker that we'll be using is creatinine and block, and this marker will be added to the working solution that we use for our NeoBase-2 assay. It will also be ran in positive ion mode. It takes about 2.5 minutes to process a sample, and we feel that this will take us about 6 months to get all our reagents, to get the instrument validated. It's $1 per test, but it'll be $92,000 per year to add GAMP to our catalog. So all of the first year hospitals are now just about sending by ELO through the Oz system. Our second year is sending, they've started working with them, trying to get them to send by ELO. They're receiving about 70 to 90 forms per day by ELO, and hopefully as more hospitals begin to add on, we'll see more. The lab is waiting for the policy center training. The hospitals are being trained in how to send packages through Oz, or rather through the courier system. And Crosstown is also being trained on how they receive packages. So we're still in a training mode with the actual hospitals and providers, as well as how those packages get here to the lab. So just a brief update on what they're doing right now. So their go live for the first year, they've had since 6/20 of 22 has been about 5, and they've got customer support handed over to the actual provider. It's been about 19. For the second year, we're at like 3 of them are still up in the system setup, and 1 is in the validation phase, and 2 are up to the go live, and 7 hospitals are ready for the customer support handoff, but 11 of them are on the backlog. And for year 3, they have just 4 that's ready for the initiating the contact with the actual hospital. Any questions?
Can you pull Natalie's chat back up, Stacy? See what she said. So she's okay with lowering the methionine since you have a second tier. Do you need other input from other centers about that?
No, because we'll be talking with Dr. Levinson about that, and once she
Once she
agrees,
approves, you're just
then
kind of
they'll-
making them aware.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm fine. Well, it keeps up our skill level too, because right now we're not having any to come across, and so the instruments are sitting there and the reagents will be fine.
So when you add MPS2 and CAM, you'll be doing all the mass spec work with liquid chromatography
Yes.
front end?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll still be on the LC-MS and that. It's just, hopefully with, us adding more assays, we'll be able to handle the volume, and we may be able to have to get another instrument because, like with our second tier test, we're gonna have to look at our workflow. We're gonna have to look at how we can get these, analytes on in a day and then get them off by the next day. Because when we look at our second tier for C3, which is the ACY MMA, that's a 4-hour processing time. And so that's why it's not like if you have a positive that flags from Phase 1 today, we can't run it today. We have to run it. We can set it up, but we won't be able to see it until the next day.
Sounds like y'all need a night shift.
I'm not talking to you. Yes, I mean, it
Don't curse us like that.
It's a lot to going into that. You would have to bring Hugh in because we have to have we have to have support. But,
Oh, Chris said she thought you were cool, man.
So with that, and then we are still looking at, because we want to collaborate with Orchard on bringing that system in, I'd rather bring it in MLD. And if we do that, then we can look at definitely bringing in another, well, not TQV, but it'll be probably a Q site, so that we can take some of the load, because right now, all of it is either on 2 instruments for your second tier, and as we cut these cutoffs, they're gonna start seeing more of them, and we're gonna need to be able to have that kind of volume.
So adding the machine will help you to speed that up.
Adding on a machine and another person. Yes.
I know the technicalities of your LSD testing, but it's a shame MPS2 isn't multiplex.
Okay, so
Okay.
here's
All right,
that.
so here-
So I
here you
didn't
go.
say much about that, because with the MPS2 now, it does, the standalone means that the lab developed test means that we're gonna have to get all these reagents separately. With the multiplex, it would actually come in with the Neo LSD, or rather the LSD.
That's more the
Yes, but the thing of it is, this one is ready, will be ready, I think, in October, whereas the, multiplex won't be ready until probably fourth quarter next year. So, we're trying to stay on top of that, as well as CAH,
Let's say
as well as.
somebody wants that other one comes along, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah, there's like one case a year in the state, maybe.
What's that, MPS2?
Yeah, I think it's like 1 in 100,000, so.
Okay, the incidence rate.
So we'll be able to go live 6 months from,
If all things are working in tandem, then hopefully 6 months we will be able to have, we could go live.
6 months from the vote today, or?
Well, no,
sometime?
no.
Okay.
No, that's after we talked with, with Chris, Dr. Rumpler, and Dr. Levinson, and then after that, then deciding with Perkins, how we can get our reagents.
Okay.
And then we gotta get the instruments validated, and then that
Like
kind of thing. So that's why we're opening, I mean,
year
we
and
may,
a half?
about the second quarter of next year.
Oh, okay. Just trying to prepare me to wait.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that say?
Right.
Yes.
Someone read the comment box, we can't read
You can't see 'em.
Picking on me.
Yeah, Chris said,
Yeah,
Dr.
right.
Ham said 1 per year, and then Chris said with his record with LSDs, he'll have 2 per year, or more. He might have 2 per quarter.
All right.
And just one other reminder, that I didn't discuss on there. When you're sending samples, just like with, earlier you were talking about having enough samples, your send out samples that we're sending out for second tier, they do require the two dry blood spots, and they do also require that, it's taking about 7 days before you can get it. So if we get it and we tell you that, personnel has called us with a result, it's only based on the fact that they just finally finalized it, and we're just trying to get that information back out to you as quick as possible. If we have blood in the lab, we'll send it out, and we normally let the nurses know so that they can inform you all that we have the sample and we're getting ready to retest it, but it still takes 7 days on any biochemical or DNA sequencing test.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, the next item is discussion on MPS 2 and GAMP. Is there any issues people would like to bring up for discussion? I know Glenn just went over basic outline of how those assays are going to be done.
I think we gotta decide if we're gonna, it's been added to the RUS, MPS 2. So we've got to decide if we're gonna add it to our panel. We'll need a vote for that.
Yes. And they should be split up because GAMP is not added.
Yeah, GAMP's not on it, on the RUS. Yeah.
Okay.
So George, at the meeting when I talked about MPS 2, again, kind of the outcomes with that, because my understanding with MPS 2 is bone marrow is not quite as effective as MPS 1. So is there any discussion of that before that approval,
For what the recommended?
Yeah.
Someone else would know better than I about that.
When it got recommended to be added, what were they still saying, the bone marrow?
Yeah. And the second tier is the same.
Yes.
They're in the same path. They're next to each other in the pathway. But naturally, since this is done by biochemists, 2 comes before 1.
Do we have a motion? Or we already have more discussion?
It's on the RUS, so I motion to add it to the screen.
Second? Second. All right, we'll do a roll call. All right, here we
We have a
go.
lot of people left. You might want to state the motion, just that it's MPS 2.
Okay, the motion is for the Tennessee Department of Health to add screening for mucopolysaccharidosis type 2 to the state's newborn screening panel. Okay, but if we don't have, we may not have people vote on this right now.
Go with who we've got.
Let's see what we got. Okay. Dr. Aguinaga.
Yes, I do.
All right. So far, so good.
Yes.
Dr. S. You seconded, didn't you?
Yes. I still agree.
Makes sense. Lisa, Haswig? Yes, oh, that's right, okay, good. Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Ms. Carroll?
Yes.
Dr. Clayton?
Abstain.
And Dr. Hamid is not here.
Yes.
Oh, there I call, that's right. Oh, there you are. That's right, you told me you would be, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Serrano?
Her mic is
In the
broke.
chat.
Okay. They have that thumbs up, emoji thing. Dr. Russell? Dr. Stokes? Oh, sorry, missing someone. Dr. Stevens?
Yes.
Dr. Stokes? He's not here. Dr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Gillen?
Yes.
Dr. Boseal?
Yes.
Dr. Ham? Yes. You know what you're getting yourself into.
I get it.
Dr. Emerson?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Dr. Clark?
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty good. So, it looks like we're gonna be doing MPS 2. It's just the details.
That's the screen report that sex of the baby. Do we know if it's boy or girl on the filter?
Yes.
This is an X-link, so I think.
Yes.
Right.
Is there any other discussion or conversation on these?
So GAMP has been sent to the secretary for approval, recommended.
Yes.
I'm just waiting
It
for
went,
approval.
in May.
So waiting for approval from the secretary.
I don't know of any occasion where the secretary hasn't agreed with the advisory committee.
So that's next. Do we want to vote on GAMP, or do we want to wait and see if the secretary approves it?
I would think about it.
Yes, right.
Because it
Wait till
could put
November,
us
we'll do it
in a
November.
situation where we're gonna do it, but nobody else is.
Right.
Which has happened
We did
before.
with Crab A,
Which
Yeah,
we do with Crabbe, yeah.
but that's because it was that whole grouping.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Other than the wrap-up, the next thing on the agenda is, discussion on medical foods. Does someone want to start that?
That's been an issue for 50 years,
Yes, it has.
actually 60. I'm not.
I think the problem is, as I understand it, the insurance companies think it's just lunch and dinner. You know, they don't realize this is actually medicine, and you can't just go shopping for the right things.
That's ignorant.
Yeah, yeah. They do that a lot.
Yeah, right. I mean, the problem we had was essentially, many of our patients, there's only a limited number of suppliers of these formulas, and essentially, my understanding was essentially we're not reimbursed in a way that was making it profitable enough for them to continue to do it, especially since there's a shortage of more, routine formulas over the course of the past year, and they shift a lot of the resources away from that. So that's, I think, what prompted the most recent discussion.
I don't know, is there any, path to take to improve on this? I realize it has been a topic, and it's a topic in the advisory committee meetings.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the dietitian staff at Vanderbilt and Bonner have talked to some of the folks at TennCare, try to make sure, at least on the state plans, that we're getting approval, and some hope that some of the private payers will follow suit on that. But every patient has a different problem, and, it's kind of hard to have a blanket fix. So my dietitian spends a lot of time on it, just in terms of clinical hours to get that sorted out.
Dr. Joel may want to speak to it, I don't know for sure, but I know he had a recent.
What do you think the national fix would be? Does this have to be instead of foods, we probably should make it formulas.
Right.
Because
People have tinkered with the words to
Yeah,
try to
but
get it.
it's really things we need in the first 6 months. Or beyond that.
No, actually.
Lifetime.
Yeah, so, and that's part of the issue too, is that most people perceive that as an infant problem. and then you end up fighting this battle over and over and over. But I know there's been national legislation before, and Frank let them know where that stands at the moment.
With the national, like if formula companies, if pharmacies stopped making insulin because it wasn't profitable,
No, right.
would the government step in and say, you have to, what's the fix? It's, in a free society, what's
Yeah, right. That's above my pay grade.
Dr. Meade talked this morning about the potential of getting some type of state legislation that would require at least the insurance companies that operate in this state. And that's one way that the Rare Diseases Council is going after it with the governor's office. Or at least potentially that's the way they are envisioning. And that would at least help, and it would be for all ages. It would need to be lifetime coverage. Of course, then you have the people that don't have coverage, but
maybe start with a list of the diseases in the formula or the substances, so that it wasn't so vague of.
Well, and we've supplied some that take care of, like, our diagnosis, which patients, we have done that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think things have tried to.
But as far as making a legislative thing, to say, these are the diseases and these are the.
Right, well, I mean, if it's on the newborn screen, I mean, the list is already there, right? I think we're all we had to treat those folks. We pick them up.
And then the stuff, the CKU formula, whatever they do.
Have you looked at other programs, there in Indiana or Illinois, like their newborn screening program, helps provide like the medical formula. And that, but I don't know like where their funding comes from, and so I wonder what their model looks like.
Yeah.
In providing those formulas.
Probably state funded. She said Illinois or Indiana, she's not sure which one.
It'd be nice to know the number and the budget, and, so we could be very specific to get a decent legislation through the state. I mean, here's the cost, and here's, and then you could have your patient advocate.
Right.
I mean, nothing works better than to have these families come and say, here's my little baby, and they can't get formula because you legislators aren't letting them do it.
I think the bigger problem is when they get older than even when they're infants, because you've got children's special services that can help for some of the population. You've got a few of these things on WIC that can help with some. But when they go off of those programs, then there's just nothing out there but what little insurance that they have, and then the insurance is denying them as being not something we cover. I know the advisory committee did a white paper a number of years ago. There has been legislation hinted in Congress, but it's never really made it through.
Yeah, in particular with adults who turn 21.
Yeah, you can get children's special services up to 21, which would help with some populations. This stuff is expensive.
Yeah. But it's from that point on, the rest of their life.
For sure.
So we've already submitted a list to TennCare of the disorders and the formulas needed?
I know that, they did meet with a few of us over Zoom or email and, at all the centers. They're trying to give them some feedback. Now, where it stands beyond that, I don't know.
Okay.
I know they're trying to at least start with focusing on the TennCare folks.
Yeah.
And then, hope you get some support.
It might be cheaper to get them the right food than to take care of them in the emergency.
No, yeah, the adults just fall off the wagon, and then come back very soon.
Kind of crazy.
Do we need a medical foods workers or a meeting separate?
No, I think perhaps we could tack on to figuring out what the Rare Disease Council is going to do, because they might have better luck with
Oh, yeah, make your doctor a deputy job.
It's already on the
I vote that we make that.
Motion, I second.
I'm already working on it. I'm already working on it.
Well, I mean, could someone from Tinker come talk to this group, even just because, I mean, you know, I don't feel like I have the whole picture myself sometimes.
We could, for next meeting, we could ask.
That might be a
if
helpful way to.
Dr. B could come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not, she can usually dial in. Dr. Clark said Dr. B was on the call earlier.
She was.
So, my question, is there going to be a list that's editable, because things change over time? Unless you can just do a blanket statement, metabolic formulas.
Yeah, it would have to be generic, or you could walk in with that.
Well, and some even vitamin supplements, I mean, it's, you know, that's part of the problem.
Wide
Yes.
Right. Well, and are they really supplements or are they replacements? Because these people are missing them. And so I think the term that we've switched over or made sure that we implement is that you're replacing something that's missing. You're not supplementing it. It's not in addition. It's a missing thing that needs to be replaced.
Okay.
I understand that in some cases there are people that do have things that are, getting things in addition, going above and beyond, but in many cases, this is a deficiency that these people have, and they need replacement therapy for it. And there often aren't generics available in many cases.
If anybody has anything that they want us to share with the group, any paper or any article or anything that you want to share among yourselves, just send it to us and we'll get it out to everybody, as well as to Dr. B at Care. And we'll ask her to see if she would like to sit down on an open discussion at the November meeting. I think TennCare is doing better. Once we started conversations with her, when Dr. Ward started talking to them, it'll probably never be resolved.
Is there anything anyone would like to bring up? And anyone online as well? Generally related to this topic.
We got an hour until.
Okay, well,
I know the long-term follow-up group is gonna meet. Yes. Afterwards.
is there any other group news?
So the Department of Health Metabolic Formula Program provides formula for treating conditions such as PKU and almost-urea. Where? Ohio.
Yeah, Iowa, all have some kind of filtering demonstration program. Iowa has some merit, I don't know, like they have like a detailed physical report of like what it looks like for their.
So we have a couple states we might could just check with too to see what it looks like for them.
I think that might be a good idea. We could find even just stuff online from some other states.
Yeah.
Like a chart.
Yeah.
So, Rizwan Hamid here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I think, this is a very important issue, and all of us who see metabolic patients, one way or the other, end up spending a lot of time on this because this affects our day-to-day essentially care of these patients. And it is proven to be very difficult to resolve both on the national level and at local level when providers or organizations actually approach legislatures because maybe the legislatures think about it as a conflict of interest because, okay, metabolic doctor is asking for his patients. I think, we know that SIMD as well as ACNG have been working on this issue for a while at a national level, and we have not really seen any major progress on this. So one approach that we had considered in RDAC, and I think maybe worth doing, is to actually work it from a patient's angle, which is we need to involve families who are willing to spend some time and have them actually form a peer group, which then goes to the legislatures and talk to them. I think that historically has been the most powerful way to get things done in the legislature. I would say that if people remember how initial coverage for PKU formula was reached in the state of Tennessee, that again, as I am told by John Phillips, was a major push initially driven by a couple of families. So I think all of us, 3 or 5 metabolic centers in the state of Tennessee have patients, and meaning we see a lot of patients, and amongst those patients, there may be families who are good advocates, who are willing to spend some time to meet with us so they can organize as a peer group and actually frankly go downtown and talk to the legislators. I think that is going to be the most powerful way to do it. Because otherwise I think talking to TennCare, talking to, which RDAC is going to do, obviously, we are meeting with Victor Wu in weeks. It is just, we hit a block because most of these patients can't even pronounce the name of, most of these folks can't even know what this means. People in TennCare insurance companies who are making authorization decisions are many times financial people, many times nurses who have no idea what even something as simple as PKU may be. So we end up hitting the sort of roadblock time and again. And education at that level many times doesn't help because next time you call, there's somebody else online and they again have the same problem. They don't understand what PKU is, they never heard of it. Dr. Walsh earlier gave the example of insulin. Well, there are millions of patients with diabetes, and most people would know if you stop somebody on the road what diabetes is, they will probably know what it is. And many patients would know what insulin does. It lowers blood sugar. When you're talking about metabolic disease or rare genetic disorders, we are dealing with conditions that are 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 300,000, and that job becomes very difficult to do. So I think a simple example of how patient power works is how you're able to, pretty much most states were able to put Krabbe's disease on the newborn screening panel, regardless of what the medical provider said or thought about the data that is not very convincing. And it was a core group of families who made that happen, regardless of what the providers think. So I think I'm just suggesting that that we actually, both in Vanderbilt, ETSU, Knoxville, Memphis, Chattanooga, approach it in a different angle and get a peer group together. We strategize with that peer group how to make this.
So he wants to get a group together. Some parents from each region.
So maybe y'all could think about if there are any families that you know that might could become part of Dr. Hamid's group.
So I'm curious, specifically, are we looking for internet savvy kind of young couples, or are we looking for very vocal and possibly belligerent?
I would say we are looking for both, because both internet savvy people will approach the problem differently, but vocal and belligerent folks can be very intimidating and convincing when somebody's meeting with them face to face.
Yeah, because I had one grandmother of who takes care of her grandson, and she was not very happy, and she just refused to pay the bill, and I think it was over $10,000.
Yeah.
And then she was like, "Go ahead and send the collectors after me. I don't care."
Yeah, I think the key thing here is people who are passionate enough to spend some time on this, because again, this is free work, and folks who take time to essentially meet with each other and are passionate enough that they will go and then meet with the legislature and to make this happen. So I think that would be that probably would work pretty well, or likely, or may work very well.
Yeah. Okay. Sure, we all have examples.
Yeah, I think we need to, I think, talk offline and, get a core group of people together, arrange. Nowadays, thanks to Zoom and WebEx, these meetings can happen obviously online. In our division, we have passionate supporters of this, including our dietitians, including Natalie Owens, who's present there, Camille Carter, who's there. I'm sure in other centers, there are dietitians, meaning people who are actually involved in day-to-day and how much time they spend. Those people can be very passionate, and it technically wouldn't take, it's not an insurmountable, essentially, task to develop a peer group like that, sort of peer advisory group for medical necessity stuff, who could actually come and make public comments here in the GAC meetings about the problems they're having on an ongoing basis. We, after all, invite pharmaceutical companies. I think having a peer update of what is happening on the front end from the patient point of view may be a good idea for our GAC.
So maybe y'all could look at your staffing and see if there's a dietitian out there that might want to kind of spearhead taking this on from one of the centers, maybe?
Spearhead arranging parents.
If you've got volunteers from the different centers and they say this family agrees, then that person would convene.
I mean, I still feel like we need, to go back to the legislation a little bit, because, having a group of, parents to evoke all this compassion from everybody, I mean, we still need something discreet to act upon. Other than that, it's just a group of people concerned about something that's kind of esoteric to most people. So I mean, if it was more, like I said, a concrete plan that they can take and go, I think that's the first step rather than finding a group of people, although that would certainly be part of how to move the ball.
Jewel would be proud.
Hi, this is Bar. I'm the metabolic dietitian in Memphis. And I've been talking with Ellen a little bit over email about some things related to this. I know with our clinic, I think this is the same patient Dr. Joel was mentioning earlier, we were able to eventually get coverage from TennCare just by bringing it to their attention. I can't remember who we worked with, but she ended up, I think she added it to the formulary once we gave her the name of the formula. So I don't know, I'd be happy to provide a list of the formulas and the different medications and different disorders if that would be helpful. And I can check in with Ellen about any particular patients that she has in mind. But yeah, I'd be happy to help with this.
Katie Omar.
I will also kind of reiterate what Dr. Joel mentioned earlier. It does seem that we have more of the issues with our adults and getting the lifelong coverage. That's where we start to run into more denials.
And just to give recognition for the person that was helpful with this, that was Dr. Jonah, Jona, Bandio Pad, Hyay, Haya? I'm not sure if that's correct.
Dr. B. Dr. B.
Dr. Bandio Padhi?
We call her Dr. B, and she was on the meeting earlier, and yes, she's our kind of go-to person for all things health.
Okay.
Great person.
So maybe brainstorming with her might not be a bad idea. Because if she knows the system, then maybe she knows the best course of action as well.
Maybe we need to share Dr. Hamid's contact information with her, maybe share hers with him to make an introduction so they can start that conversation.
And it looks like she lives in Nashville.
Yes, we talked to her, Dr. Joel.
Okay. She's been very nice. So you'll have the two doctors that have impronounceable names working together? I just need to hear her say it once. And then I should get it.
So let's start with that. Let's start with contacting her.
Okay.
And we'll ask her to come in November to be a part of the discussion.
and maybe put her in touch with Dr. Hamid. But in the meantime, we'll put her in touch with Dr. Hamid. Yeah. Is there anything else? I'm gonna do my meeting after the meeting. Yeah, I think we're good.
Good?
Yeah.
Anything else? Anyone online here? If not, is there any, well, that's the wrap up. We need a motion to adjourn. We don't need a motion. A motion to adjourn is always in order. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you? Yeah. The next one? What's that?
Oh, no, well.
Oh, gosh, I had to see this on
Amanda, are we meeting in here?
Yeah, we'll just do it right here.
The whole game.
Helen, it was nice to meet you. I'll work on that list. Okay.
Oh, well, and that's.
Yes, nice to meet you first.
Brought it up, so, well, she was in the program.
Thank you.
For it. And if they
Couldn't find your name.
so they just buy it.
Yeah. Okay. I had that in my email, I was like, I always call her Dr. Kitten. Okay, yeah, I got it.
What are you getting ready to do?
Long-term follow-up.
You don't need me, right?
We're gonna need you later. Maybe not today, sometime.
Well, if it's gonna end up in the newborn screening database, then yeah, they probably will need me, but right now, no. I can deal with that.
Are you, it's for long-term follow-up, does that work or no?
Oh, then we'll do
Yeah.
Waiting on the lab. You know anything about the lab? The lab, at our lab. Yes. I keep sending the emails to anybody that has comments that shut all my services. There's some kind of virus or something that keeps locking me out of the entire system at the hospital. So.
Yeah, no.
Probably.
Yeah, I was about email for this week.
Yes, and it's not fun.
I can't here, I still be on site.
Yeah, I have to go physically and then